seated in the gallery as well, members in respect of the standing orders as well as practice and procedures previously established. I would like to extend a special welcome to Mrs. Sandra Golding and members of the Golding family. We are also joined today by members of the Diplomatic Corps, private sector representatives, and representatives of the St. Andrew South constituency. Welcome to the houses for all. For all those who are here with us in the gallery and those who are joining us online or via various media broadcasts, PBCJ Live continues to stream, and I am sure all will be listening in today. I note former Minister of Finance. He stepped out? He is here. He stepped out for a little. So Omar Davis, former Member of Parliament and Minister of Finance, is here. I don't know. I think that former Member of Parliament, Morris Guy, just loves to come here to see me. And also, here is Keisha Anderson. Keisha is a senator currently sitting in the House of Parliament. Honorable Senator, welcome. So just a short housekeeping point. Just had a conversation with the Integrity Commission. This relates to all senators, all members of the House, and for those who may have sat in the last election as councillors in the by-election. We had attempted to explain this before. Members, you are not required to submit any returns to the Integrity Commission as at 31st December 2025, which would normally have been due on the 31st of March 2026. The reason is the submissions we made as at September stands as the submission, and those will last us until March of 2027, when we will submit for 31st December 2026. So for those persons who have started to send their declarations to the Integrity Commission, they will be returned to you. And for those who have not yet done so, please do not. I will ask the clerk to send a note out as well as a reminder to members of the House and the Senate. However, members, please be aware that at any time the Integrity Commission can request information from you. So persons' personal situation may be different. You may be involved in companies where the information may not have been available as at September, but is available for December, and therefore you would need to give those updates when they come to your attention. Members, I hope you enjoy today's sitting, and I hope, even with the noise, all heard as it relates to the Integrity Commission what is required of you. Clerk, call of the roll.
Mr. Clark, Mr. Green, Dr. Holness, Dr. Chang, Mrs. Williams, Mr. Bartlett, Ms. Grange, Dr. Tufton, Mr. Mackenzie, Mr. Montague, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Charles Jr., Mr. Morgan, Ambassador Marks, Mr. Samuda, Dr. Wheatley, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Mr. Terrelong, Mr. Witter, Mrs. Dalrymple Filbert, Ms. Morrison, Ms. Lee, Mr. Donovan Williams, Mr. Main, Ms. Crawford, Mr. Delroy Williams, Ms. Hamilton, Mr. Sieveright, Mr. Azan, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown-Burke, Mr. Buchanan, Mr. Bunting, Ms. Burchell, Dr. Campbell, Mr. Cousins, Mr. Crawford, Ms. Daly, Dr. Dawes, Mr. Golding, Mr. Gordon, Mr. Hales, Mr. Hines, Mr. Jackson, Ms. Jess, Mrs. Malahoo Fort, Mrs. Miller Bennett, Mr. Morris, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Newell, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Ms. Perkis, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Dr. Russell, Ms. Shaw, Mr. Smith, Mr. Dwayne Vaz, and Mr. Warmington. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Clerk. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, we could just go through the agenda to public business.
Statement by ministers, announcements, bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions, motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motions relating to the sitting of the House, motions for leave to introduce bills, presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained, public business. House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let me join in welcoming the family of the Leader of the Opposition, Mrs. Sandra Golding, and the children of the Leader to the House, and also former Member of Parliament and former Minister of Finance, Omar Davis, and Member Guy is here, Senator Keisha. I also seen Donna Scott Motley, former Senator. Good to have you here with us. And other members of the diplomatic corps that may have joined us. Today we will continue the budget debate with the contribution from Mr. Mark Golden, Leader of the Opposition. I ask that he be allowed to speak until the completion of his presentation so that the time be suspended.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Ayes have it. Let's make welcome to his feet, Leader of the Opposition and Member of Parliament for St. Andrew South,
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I just want to begin by thanking God Almighty for his blessings, for having enabled us all to be here, and for having enabled me to continue in the role that I play. And may he continue to show us his love and bless us with strength and commitment to do right by our beloved country, Jamaica. I want to also thank my dear wife, Sandra, who is here, for being here. Two of my children who are here as well, Tasman and Benjamin. And I want to thank the former parliamentarians who've come today, especially, well, all of them, but a special word for Dr. Omar Davis. It is very wonderful to see you, sir. I want to acknowledge the members of the Diplomatic and Consular Corps who are here, and members of my constituency executive, my two councillors, Sarah Marshall and Louise Newland. We have some senators here as well who are parliamentarians. And of course, my colleagues on both sides of the House. It's a pleasure working with you at all times, good and bad. And I particularly want to thank those on this side who have continued to provide me with their full support and enable me to do the work that I do as effectively as I can. I want to thank the staff of Parliament for the role they play in enabling us to serve as elected and appointed representatives. And I know that their situation is not always easy, but we appreciate very much the effort that they put in to enable us to do what we do in this House and in this chamber. So I thank them again. Madam Speaker, the change in political landscape of our great island that occurred in September of last year has profoundly altered the trajectory of Jamaica's future. The result ensured that this budget speech, which is my fifth as party president and leader of the opposition, is delivered from a platform of strength, momentum, and national validation. The doubling of the People's National Party's seat count is living, breathing proof that our national movement is once again firmly on a path to assuming the responsibilities of government. The work put in since 2020 has borne bountiful fruit and reset deep roots in all corners of Jamaica. It is now surely a matter of when, not if. While we did come up just short of outright victory last time, the swing is undeniable. Over 100,000 more votes for the People's National Party than 5 years ago. The margins are shrinking, and the writing is there on the wall for all to see. Madam Speaker, the 2025 general election ushered in a new generation of parliamentarians, along with several who had suffered temporary setbacks in the COVID election of 2020. We have dynamic, energized, and eager new faces to deliver, these voices ranging from the grill in the west to the eastern tip of Portland, and they have connected with voters and empathized with their needs, their goals, and their dreams. Unlike so many of the debutants seen in this House after the 2020 COVID election, they are very much here to stay. And it is my great honor to serve alongside them, and I look forward to doing so for many years to come. The combination, Madam Speaker, the combination of these youthful, ambitious souls with the experienced and slightly more grey hands of the previous generation, including myself and my fellow long-term PNP stalwarts, has created a parliamentary team for the times that we are living in, ready to hold this government to maximum accountability and to guide the direction that this House flows in, even from these opposition benches. I want to make special mention of the late Dr. Linville Bloomfield from Eastern Portland, and the late Dr. Winston Green from Southeast St. Mary, both of whom passed away while serving in this House during a previous term. Dr. Bloomfield having been murdered and no one having been brought to justice for his murder to date. The by-elections that occurred after their untimely passings resulted in Green victories. But in 2025, Isaac Buchanan and Chris Brown, in two famous victories, took back what was lost. We dedicate those victories to those two fallen servants of Jamaica. Madam Speaker, the events that took place in September 2025 can be analysed from two competing perspectives. On one side, the people of Jamaica heard our proposals for progressive governance of integrity that is accessible to all Jamaicans, and it resonated with them. The people heard our plans to build a society from the base upwards rather than from the top-down approach, and it resonated with them. The people appreciated our willingness to tackle their day-to-day problems and engineer solutions that will have a practical impact on their lives, rather than fixating on macroeconomic indicators that bear no reflection on their everyday existence. And this also resonated with them. Madam Speaker, we are the party of the people, and the people saw our eyes firmly locked on the future. They saw the government looking out for themselves and their interests, and contrasted that with the solution-oriented approach from the party of the rising sun. And while we came up just short, and only a few members on that side know the truth as to why, the writing, as I've said, is very much on the wall. Madam Speaker, gone are the days of intensely partisan, quasi-authoritarian governance that held sway when the opposition only held 14 seats. Gone are the days of arrogant sneers from the government benches when certain politically aligned media houses flood the airwaves with misinformation about disunity on this side. Well, they are now solid like a rock. The writing is very much on the wall. Glad you made it. On a personal note, Madam Speaker, the last 5 years have been some of the most invigorating and fulfilling of my 60 years on this earth. It has been a great honor to fight for the rights and defend the interests of each and every Jamaican from each and every background, including, as I've said, the additional 100,000 voters who came on board with us last September. We will not let you down. And as I say these things, I again have to give thanks and praise to the Almighty. He is my strength and my Redeemer, from whom all blessings flow. I pray that I will always do right by Him and strive to live according to His holy word. Madam Speaker, the joys of serving the people in confronting the difficult challenges faced by our beloved nation, the thrill of competing for the highest office in this land, the honorable sparring with my formidable rivals, whose day must come to come over here, continue to blaze the fire inside me. And now, with this powerful, massive of talent and commitment beside me, I very much look forward to finishing God's mission that we started in 2020 and living up to the legacy of my illustrious predecessors on whose shoulders we all stand. And we will do this by bringing a new era of innovative, strategic, caring, and honorable governance to this great nation. Madam Speaker, like many commentators and opinion makers, I have been thinking about what we must do to take Jamaica out of its chronic economic underperformance. With a GDP, a gross domestic product, which simply means the value of everything we produce, goods and services, in the course of a year. With a GDP of approximately $7,000 per person, one of the lowest in the Caribbean, compared with 19,000 US per person in Trinidad and Tobago and 26,000 US in Barbados. Jamaica's average real GDP growth has merely crawled along at around 0.8%, not even 1% over the last 10 years. The Jamaican economy is clearly not delivering for our people. Economic underperformance narrows fiscal space, so that despite the relative low debt-to-GDP ratio in the range somewhere in the 60s now, 60% range, that Jamaica has achieved with immense sacrifice of our people over the past 14 years, we are still only able to deliver budgets with central government capital expenditure of 2 to 3% of GDP, a substantial portion of which, sometimes over a third, remaining unspent at the end of successive fiscal years due to various inefficiencies. Much of our road network remains in a deplorable state. Gullies and other waterworks and waterways are in urgent need of repair, and coastal erosion, exacerbated by worsening climate conditions, outstrips modest attempts at mitigation. Madam Speaker, the education and training systems of the country are big contributors to our economic underperformance. The statistics are well known. Roughly a third of our primary school children leave primary school functionally illiterate and innumerate. They cannot read and write. A problem which, of course, feeds into the secondary system, where less than 20% of our students achieve the basic requirements of 5 CSEC subjects, including Maths and English. Only approximately 16% of Jamaicans end up with any tertiary qualification. Our workforce suffers from inadequate training and apprenticeship opportunities, so that over 60% of our workforce has no form of skill certification at all. HEART has been so badly mismanaged, despite its bespoke source of income from mandatory employer contributions. It made an accumulated operating deficit, an operating loss of $5.5 billion over the past 2 fiscal years. Remarkable and shameful. Foreign direct investment has fallen to a third of where it was in 2015 when we were there. Investors will not invest capital which will fail to generate competitive returns because the conditions for production are suboptimal and inefficient. The conditions in the health sector are so awful that they are negatively contributing to our economic prospects. Many Jamaicans overseas who would otherwise wish to return home to build Jamaica and who have the means to make a substantial contribution to nation building are unwilling to do so because of the repeated horror stories about the conditions and standards of care in our public health institutions. It is an issue which we cannot run from. Patients routinely have to sleep in corridors, in wheelchairs, on benches, or other makeshift arrangements because there are no available beds for them to be admitted. Free health care remains a fallacy because diagnostic tests, many medications, surgical implants, etc., are available only at a cost that is out of reach of most Jamaicans. Our doctors and nurses in the public health system are stretched so thin that it adversely affects their morale and patient care. Madam Speaker, Jamaica continues to fall behind as we wallow in our low-tech, low-wage, and low-growth economy. Two of the industries that employ most of our people, global services and tourism, global services being what many call BPO, are vulnerable to existential threats to their viability like artificial intelligence and climate and geopolitical shocks that periodically cause major downturns. We need a more balanced economy, Madam Speaker. Our economic underperformance contributes to the high levels of migration, one of the highest rates of brain drain, the migration of our trained professionals in the world, the hollowing out of the middle class in this country, many of whom live from paycheck to paycheck like the working poor, despite their tertiary degrees and other qualifications, and the high levels of school absenteeism, teenage pregnancy, gender-based violence, and other social ills. So, having solved the chronic debt problem that we inherited in 2012 and that we put in the heavy lifting to turn around and I pause because I have to acknowledge the work that was done in the last PNP administration under the leadership of Portia Simpson Miller, most honorable, and Dr. Peter David Phillips as finance minister. Jamaica was heading off the cliff under the previous JLP government. We were unable to even sit the IMF tests, much less pass them. Our name was mud in the international financial community. It took us a year once we came back to office to persuade the financial community that we could be trusted with a new program. And we delivered on that program for Jamaica, and Jamaica has borne fruits from the work we did. But despite Jamaica having solved the public debt problem, and I say solved it in the sense that it's still high, but we know how to manage it, and we know what it takes to manage it, and we have been successfully managing it for 14 years, consecutively. And with the murder rate falling significantly over the past 2 years, nevertheless, Jamaica remains disappointed that there are no signs of a strategic plan to deliver a strong, rapidly growing economy that creates abundant, good opportunities for our people here at home and attracts the return of Jamaican talent residing abroad. So, Madam Speaker, how do we lift ourselves out of this chronic economic lethargy? At the core of the solution is integrity. Honesty in what we say and do is the foundation of trust and confidence. A commitment to accountability and being transparent in how we govern and what we do in the name of the people as the servants of the people. We must strengthen, not weaken or undermine, the national institutions that were established to promote these principles. And we must hold perpetrators accountable for corruption. And of course, I speak of institutions like the Integrity Commission, which I had a foundational role in designing and bringing to Parliament as Minister of Justice, and the Financial Investigations Division. Madam Speaker, during the last general election in 2025, in the campaign, with its manifestos and its debates and its platform speeches, the Prime Minister did not even hint at much less disclose his intention to take the massive salary increase that he claimed he had given up when the heat reached him after Nigel Clark announced this massive salary increase on May 16th, 2023. Not a peep out of him in the election campaign. Can you imagine that in February this year, a month or so ago, we suddenly learned that effective from payday last September 2025, right after the election, the Prime Minister would be receiving his big salary after all. Madam Speaker, that is the latest chop. That is a real brogard move. It was a shameful deception, not worthy of the high office that you hold. Not worthy. Madam Speaker, as leaders, Madam Speaker, as leaders, we must hold ourselves to a high standard. And we should be quick to do the right thing by leaving the scene when transgressions come to light which are not compatible with clean and honest government in Jamaica today. Unfortunately, the reverse all too often prevails. Impunity rules the roost as persons in positions of responsibility become serial transgressors. And it doesn't seem to matter because nothing happens to hold them to account. Madam Speaker, we cannot build our nation that way. We cannot build a nation that our people aspire to and deserve on such weak and wobbly ethical foundations. That is why we on this side have signed the Leadership Code of Conduct produced by the Integrity Commission. Committing ourselves to upholding principles of good governance and being accountable if we fail to do so. You should be further strengthening the anti-corruption arsenal by introducing the important tool of unexplained wealth orders to further reinforce the tools available to law enforcement now for recovering illegally obtained income and wealth. That was agreed upon by both sides in 2019, but you have cast it asunder. Why have you abandoned the procedures of impeachment of parliamentarians and other holders of high office that former JLP Prime Minister Bruce Golding tabled in this House in 2011 and I updated by tabling a private member's bill in 2021? Why are you not pursuing procedures for the recall of non-performing elected representatives to ensure that there are consequences when conduct and performance fall below what is acceptable in a free and democratic society based on the rule of law? Why? We remain committed to these reforms that enhance accountability and good governance. I ask again, why have you not joined in our call for strong public education to promote wholesome values and attitudes based on love and respect for our fellow citizens, and playing by the rules or changing those rules if they're not fit for purpose? Why have you not joined with that? In my budget debate presentation last year, I stated a critical dimension which concerns many people a great deal and which I feel compelled to address is what may be referred to as the moral decay of the social fabric of our country. It is manifested in a lack of respect and care in how we treat each other. The callousness of the behavior we see around us every day, and the corruption that has taken over the affairs of the nation. Indeed, it has everything to do with the values we uphold, which uphold our society and our attitudes to life and to each other in our society. That is what I said then. Former Prime Minister Percival James Patterson tried with a values and attitudes program. Sadly, it was sacrificed on the altar of partisan politics. And I think former Prime Minister Bruce Golding has acknowledged his regret about that. I remain committed to pursuing a national effort for a non-political movement that embraces principles and practices for the spiritual, moral, and ethical upliftment of Jamaica. I am committed to that. Politicians should not seek to lead that movement, as experience has taught us that the approach of politicians leading it would likely mean it doesn't get off the ground. But it must be supported, it must be facilitated, and it must be championed by the government of the day, and you are failing to do so. As I said last year, Madam Speaker, our vision is that this movement will be led by spiritual and civic leaders who have the reputation, credibility, commitment, and desire to do so. Collectively, we must raise the bar as champions of change and restore the social fabric of this country. If we can do that, it will make it so much easier to overcome our challenges and achieve our economic and social goals. Integrity, Madam Speaker, is at the center of progress, and it is at the center of national development, and it must be at the center of inclusive and sustainable economic growth. Madam Speaker, the bureaucracy of the country must shift to a pro-growth philosophy and practice. The procurement system urgently needs to be reformed so that it does not unduly delay the execution of projects and programs. Madam Speaker, the government has been delinquent in doing this. As it stands today, the bureaucracy always errs on the side of cautious control. I'm going to repeat that because it's an important point. As it stands today, the bureaucracy of Jamaica always errs on the side of cautious control when our chronic low-growth situation requires bold steps forward. And I'm glad to see the Prime Minister applauding that point. The current arrangements are a big impediment to national development. Capital investment, especially in infrastructure, is a key input for stronger economic performance. But year after year, as I've said, the capital budget is pared back because of a failure to execute capital expenditures on a timely basis. In the current fiscal year, 25-26, now ending, for example, the original budget was for $62.6 billion of capital expenditure, but that has been revised down in supplementary estimates to $55.4 billion. And in the prior fiscal year, 24-25, the original budget was for $80 billion of capital expenditure, and that ended up being $62 billion. In the fiscal policy paper, slower than anticipated project execution is given as the main cause of this underperformance. Slower than anticipated project execution. We are not sufficiently focused on tackling these inefficiencies. The sloth is reflected in our legislative process, Madam Speaker. Laws of strategic importance that require urgent amendment or passage remain on the books for years without the problem being addressed. And there are many examples of this, and I'm going to mention 5. The amendment to the companies legislation to facilitate the migration to Jamaica of companies incorporated abroad. A bill was tabled by this government, I think 3 or 4 years ago, that would have done that. Not a word since. Secondly, the amendments to the 2022 firearms legislation to address the impact that it's having on the backlog in the criminal justice system. It needs to be fixed because it is causing big problems in the criminal justice system. Thirdly, the new Customs Act that entered Parliament over 5 years ago still hasn't made it into law. We're talking about the logistics, we're talking about trade, we're talking about the impetus for economic growth and development, and we can't get these critical laws passed in a timely fashion. Fourthly, the amendments to laws governing teenage promiscuity, which are throwing hundreds of adolescents before the courts each year, despite the 2018 reform recommendations of the Joint Select Committee, which I was on and some of you were on, which reviewed these laws. These should be fixed urgently. And fifthly, the legislation to establish the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority, NARA, the vehicle announced last year to drive post-Melissa reconstruction, but remains currently a mere department within the Office of the Prime Minister, with no legislative framework, no statutory powers to enable it to pierce through the knotty bureaucracy and drive rapid transformation reconstruction. Madam Speaker, this legislative inefficiency negatively impacts our economy and our society. As regards the first of those examples, in its preliminary review of the budget for 26-27, PricewaterhouseCoopers, the international accounting firm, audit firm, commented on the need for initiatives to encourage taxpayers to bring business activities and investments home to Jamaica. We have a big diaspora. We need to encourage them to bring their capital here. PwC said, where designed and implemented properly, this could bring in fresh economic activity that is currently taking place outside Jamaica, which in turn could bring in additional tax revenues after such activities or investments migrate to Jamaica. There is no good reason for this to remain in limbo, and it's consistent with what the opposition spokesman for finance said last Thursday about digital nomads, encouraging people abroad to come here, spend their money, and help to drive consumer demand, drive investment, and drive economic growth. Instead, what do I hear? I hear the Prime Minister retreating 30 years into his spin on FinSAC. He will no doubt to seek to revise history to suit his desired narrative. That is a refuge of someone who has run out of ideas. And Madam Speaker, he should have delivered the report that his government wasted over $150 million on and never delivered about that story of FinSAC. That report has never been delivered. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister's narrative cannot help Jamaica move forward in this perilous time. Madam Speaker, while the country's fiscal reforms have achieved debt stabilization is not the same thing as economic optimization. As the government's track record shows, debt stabilization can coexist with economic stagnation. The government's February 2026 fiscal policy paper projects that the economy will suffer a severe contraction, negative growth. In their paper, they said 4.5% of GDP. I hear the finance minister saying it won't be as bad as that based on what the PIOG has said recently, but it's still going to be severely negative for the current fiscal year, resulting from the catastrophic impact and ongoing effects of Hurricane Melissa. Unlike the economic contraction brought by the COVID pandemic, the current downturn is caused by real damage to the productive capacity of the country, especially in Western Jamaica. Assets that were damaged or destroyed include homes, business places, hotels, hospitals, schools, farming equipment and farms, etc., electricity transmission and distribution networks, water supply facilities, and other infrastructure. Madam Speaker, I have read that 215,000 buildings sustained damage of varying severity, including approximately 190,000 homes, of which 24,000, they say, were completely destroyed. The World Bank's estimate, based on intense aerial surveys after Melissa, is that the physical damage to the assets of this country, publicly and privately owned, was US $8.8 billion. That's about 1.36 trillion Jamaican dollars, approximately 40% of Jamaica's GDP, current GDP. The Planning Institute of Jamaica, PIOJ, has more recently indicated that when economic losses and various additional costs are included, the total loss to Jamaica from Melissa is US $12.2 billion, which is 1.98, nearly 2 trillion Jamaican dollars, or approximately 56% of GDP, 56%. In other words, we have been hit very, very hard, and we need to fight even harder to get the country out of the slump. Early investment in recovery is needed to turn the negative cycle occasioned by Melissa's destruction into positive economic growth. Early investment. Some of us may be familiar with the proverb, early money is like yeast. And that proverb encapsulates the truism that early investment is needed to turn this situation around. The time to aggressively pursue recovery from the Melissa disaster and to set the platform for higher levels of sustainable growth is while the fiscal rules are suspended. Now is the time to drive GDP growth, because it will be much more challenging once the maximum 2-year suspension of the fiscal rules comes to an end and the law does not permit any further extension. At that point, which is probably, I assume it will be extended for 2 years. It's been extended for 1, but I assume it will be 2 years. At that point, in other words, with the fiscal year commencing April 1, 2028, the fiscal rules will again chip in. The fiscal rules will require years of tight fiscal policy to generate higher surpluses, primary surpluses, that can bring the public debt down to the 60% legislative target by the legislative deadline. This will clamp down on expenditure on infrastructure and other public goods. Having stripped the cupboard bare with the sell-off of the Norman Manley International Airport and the Sangston International Airport's future revenues, no major forward sale of assets is planned that can provide additional fiscal space at that time. So, and I also want to make one point, which is that although the fiscal policy paper has this target date for achieving 60% of GDP as 2030, March 31, 2030, in the law, it's still March 31, 2028. I assume the minister is going to bring legislation to fix that, but who knows? Madam Speaker, with the fiscal rules being temporarily suspended, now is the time to really focus on driving recovery and growth. However, that is not the strategy that the government is pursuing. The government's housing repair program, roofs, of $10 billion Jamaican for the current fiscal year, 25-26, is less than 1/3 of 1% of GDP. Less than 1/3 of 1% of GDP. The PIOJ says the damage to Jamaica is 56% of GDP. A $500,000 grant, Jamaican, to households rendered homeless by the storm, it is welcome, but it's also clearly inadequate to rebuild homes. The same is true for the households that suffered major damage and are receiving $200,000 grants towards their repairs, and the $75,000 grants for those who suffered relatively minor damage. All of that money is welcome, no doubt, and we're glad for those who are getting it. But clearly it is insufficient to repair the major damage to the housing stock in Western Jamaica in particular. These grants are limited to those households that have been assessed by the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, and the numbers suggest that it will not cover 100% of those who suffered total loss or major damage. Many have not been assessed. $5 billion out of the $10 billion has been allocated to those whose homes have to be totally rebuilt, which implies support for only 10,000 households of the 24,000 homes that we are told have been totally destroyed. I'll say it again. Half of the $10 billion is for those who have suffered major damage or total loss. Sorry, half of it, $5 billion is for those who have suffered total loss. That can only support 10,000 households being rebuilt. We are told that 24,000 households were totally destroyed. Clearly, not even half. Similarly, with $4 billion allocated to those needing major repairs and $1 billion allocated to those needing less extensive repairs, this implies support for only 33,333 households out of 166,000 households who are estimated to have suffered damage needing repairs across both of those two categories. Madam Speaker, the upshot is that there is a real need for much more extensive investment in restoring decent, habitable shelter to Jamaicans who suffered housing damage in the hurricane. Much of that damage is uninsured. Homes that receive only partial repairs and are not restored to full habitability will mean families that are hobbled by unplanned housing repair costs for months and years to come. This will only reduce their disposable income to spend on the ordinary needs of life and feed into further economic malaise, the various manifestations of poverty, and worsen the growing problem of mental illness. The ROOFs program also appears to ignore the element of resilience in its design, merely handing out grants of amounts which are manifestly insufficient to cover the cost of adequate repairs, guarantees that households resort to the least cost approaches to effecting those repairs because the money is enough, so they have to make it stretch. This is clearly short-sighted, Madam Speaker, as Jamaicans should be using construction materials and techniques that will make their homes more resilient to future climate disasters than they were before. And I ask, where is the guidance and supervision to ensure that basic but effective techniques to ensure greater resilience are followed? I don't see any big public education telling people how to rebuild a roof properly that makes it more resilient in a low-budget way. I don't hear that. Where is the monitoring to ensure the use of bolts rather than nails and straps and other relatively low-cost construction inputs to provide greater resilience to hurricane winds and rain? I don't see it. That was 25-26, Madam Speaker. What are we to expect from the budget for the coming 26-27 fiscal year? Well, despite the massive hit to our economy and the growing despair and anger that many thousands of Jamaicans feel who really need help, the budget for the coming year allocates a contingency of $30 billion Jamaican for capital expenditure on recovery from Hurricane Melissa. 30 billion Jamaican dollars. That is less than 1% of GDP. The country suffered 56% of GDP loss, including 40% of physical asset loss. And the allocation for capital expenditure for Hurricane Melissa recovery in the coming fiscal year is less than 1% of GDP. The budget also brings a tax package of $18 billion at a time when the economy is reeling from Melissa and the war in the Middle East is threatening to drive up the cost of living. This is not a budget to drive economic recovery. And, Madam Speaker, when you look at the fiscal policy paper that the government tabled in February last month, it projects negative real GDP growth of 0.5% negative of GDP for the coming fiscal year, 2026-27. And this is not surprising, as the tax package will reduce disposable incomes and further constrain consumer demand. And I have a bit more to say on some of those measures shortly. This aspect of the budget will therefore be pro-cyclical in its effect. What does that mean? It will suppress consumer demand and reinforce the downward spiral of the economy rather than pushing against the downward spiral to turn it into a virtuous circle. It is pro-cyclical instead of counter-cyclical when the cycle is heading in the wrong direction. This could not come at a worse time because the war in the Middle East is driving up oil and gas prices. And it's not just oil and gas prices. It is going to include fertilizers. It's going to include plastics that are used in manufacturing and so many other things, because in that area, the Persian Gulf, natural gas production is being shut down. Oil and gas can't escape. And it is part of the whole supply chain for the food production of the world and the manufacturing production of the world. Petrochemicals are a critical ingredient in fertilizers and in pharmaceutical drugs and so many other things. So we're really looking at a dread situation. The combination of the post-Melissa hardship, the Middle East war, and the government's tax package is a toxic cocktail. Toxic. It will be bitter medicine to the Jamaican people. And Prime Minister, you need to tell the people when you speak on Thursday what your plans are for protecting the society from the impact of this Middle East war, especially those who are still struggling to get their lives back together after Melissa. That's what the people want to hear from you, not Finsa. If you want to talk about Finsa, bring the report. Bring the report and let us debate Finsa. Bring the report and make us debate Finsa. Madam Speaker, as expertly outlined by the opposition spokesperson for finance last Thursday, the government was not forced into this tax package. It was not forced into continuing to extract funds from the National Housing Trust. There are other options, and a better way forward is possible. Our finance spokesperson has drilled down and shown in detail that by focusing on the needs of the post-Melissa economy rather than unimaginative bookkeeping solutions, the government could have avoided imposing $29.4 billion in new revenue measures, $18.1 billion of new taxes, and $11.4 billion of NHT extraction on the Jamaican people for the coming fiscal year. As he has shown, there is a better way. The impact on the debt-to-GDP ratio of financing the gap without resorting to additional taxation is minimal, a mere 0.44% of GDP. Our approach would leave more money in the pockets of the Jamaican people and more reserves in the National Housing Trust to help reverse the negative GDP growth that Jamaica is now suffering and drive recovery at a faster rate. We have a better plan. A better plan. Madam Speaker, looking at the tax measures, they are problematic. 10.1 billion Jamaican dollars of tax package is on sweetened beverages and will mainly come out of the pockets of low-income households. Similarly, 3.6 billion Jamaican dollars is an increase in the Environmental Protection Levy, the EPL, which will be borne by consumers again when manufacturers and importers pass on those costs to consumers. Jamaicans are already facing hard times with a cost of living crisis after the Melissa disaster. It's going to be made even worse by this tax package that the government is imposing on the people, and it's coming at a time when the Middle East war is going to start giving us a severe beating as well. These revenue measures will have an inflationary impact, pushing up the cost of living on the Jamaican people at a time when the cost of living is spiking due to the war in the Middle East. As I've said, bitter medicine is on its way. as our finance spokesman pointed out, despite the way that these measures have been sold to the public, neither of the taxes on sweetened beverages or the environmental protection levy, neither of them is designed in a way which will improve public health or support environmental causes, neither of them. The tax on sweetened drinks is imposed on the volume of liquid in the container, not on the amount of sugar in the liquid in the container. And therefore, it provides no incentive for beverage manufacturers to reduce sugar content. Furthermore, the mere fact that the government intends to collect this tax, which is how it's funding its budget, shows that it intends for the beverages to be purchased anyway, so as to generate the tax. And they're not seeking to reduce consumption. And I want to just show you. This bottle of water contains 500 milliliters, which is half a liter, and it costs $100 on the street or in a corner shop. 2 of these bottles of water make 1 liter and cost $200. A liter of gas at the pump is $185. Water costs more than gas in Jamaica. $200 for 2 bottles, making 1 liter, $185 per liter at the pump. Water costs more than gas in Jamaica. If we really want to encourage healthy consumption, then remove the GCT from water. And other healthy alternatives so that the people can afford to buy them. The Environmental Protection Levy, the EPL, has nothing to do with environmental protection. Despite its name, the money goes straight into the consolidated fund as general revenue. It's not earmarked for any environmental cause whatsoever. It's just like any other tax, and it's used to fund expenditures generally, not to fund environmental expenditures in particular. Furthermore, the announced change to the EPL will favor importers and make local manufacturers less competitive, and that is a very bad thing. We need to encourage local manufacturing and value added here, not importing value added from abroad. We need to drive growth and create wealth in the country. As it stands now, the EPL is applied to 100% of the CIF value of imports, but is applied to 75% of the sale price of locally manufactured goods. This differential, 100% on the imports, CIF value, 75% on the sale price of locally manufactured goods, that differential recognizes different positions that are occupied by importers and manufacturers in the local supply chain. Importers add their profit margin to the CIF value, and there then may be additional margins added by distributors and possibly retailers. Applying the EPL to 75% of the local manufacturer good price seeks to level the playing field, as the manufacturer sale price includes all of the value added of their input costs and their profit margin. The government is now moving to apply the EPL, the Environmental Protection Levy, to 100% of the sale price of locally manufactured goods, from 75 to 100%. Also, it is increasing the rate of the EPL from half of 1% to 0.8%. That's a 60% increase in the rate. This means that the cost burden of the EPL to local manufacturers will be greater than it is to importers, favoring imports over local manufacturing of competing products, of exchangeable products. This is a major design flaw in the new tax, and it needs to be corrected. And I'm calling the Minister of Finance to correct it. Madam Speaker, in the Minister's Revenue Measures Ministry Paper number 17, the Minister of Finance said that the government is putting GCT on digital services and intangibles purchased from overseas providers by consumers in Jamaica. It says that this is projected to raise 300 million Jamaican dollars in the last quarter of the coming fiscal year. That's between January and March 2027. And $4.2 billion in the following fiscal year, 27-28. But in her budget speech last Tuesday, the minister spread confusion and muddied the waters by seeking to justify this new tax as protecting local retailers. How can imposing GCT on digital services help local retailers? It is policy incoherence. And in 2024, their government already provided an incentive for imported goods that are purchased online. They doubled the customs duty threshold from $50 US to $100 US. So they're moving in two competing directions. But the truth of the matter is that if it's a digital services tax on intangibles, it really has no impact on retailers. Madam Speaker, I want to say a little bit about the draining of the National Housing Trust. This year, we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the establishment of the National Housing Trust. It was and is a transformational institutional innovation of the late, great Prime Minister Michael Joshua Myers. Sadly, the budget for the coming fiscal year 26-27 again includes non-tax revenue of 11.4 billion Jamaican dollars in the form of a transfer of resources out of the National Housing Trust to the government's coffers to pay its housekeeping expenses. We must recall that this was originally introduced in 2013 as a temporary 4-year measure ending in 2017. It was written into the law as a 4-year measure. It was necessary at that time because we were at the height of Jamaica's debt crisis, when Jamaica was required to achieve primary surplus targets of 7.5% of GDP each year to turn the economy onto a path of debt sustainability. Remember, at that time, the debt was not at 140-odd%, not 60-odd% where it is now. And that was necessary. And it achieved that, and I must tell you, I was in cabinet at the time. We were all very concerned about it. An international accounting firm, independent firm, confirmed to us in writing at the time that the removal of the 11.4 billion per year for 4 years would not undermine the operating performance of the National Housing Trust because of the surpluses it had and the pace at which it was rolling out investment. That is the only basis upon which we were prepared to move with it. 4 years and 4 years only. And it achieved the objective, and Jamaica was able to discontinue the borrowing relationship with the IMF in 2017 at the end of our program. Despite those circumstances, the then opposition vehemently criticized it at the time. Vehemently. They even likened it to a bank robbery. And the leader of that party, Andrew Holness, who is now the Prime Minister, said he would never let that happen. He said he would ring-fence the National Housing Trust to prevent its resources from being taken by the government. And he committed to reversing it should he become Prime Minister. Well, he became Prime Minister in 2016, and they have proceeded to amend the law twice to extend it by a further 8 years. And in the throne speech last month, them said they're going to take it for 5 more years again. Oh my God, his words were utterly false. Utterly false. Under his watch, as Minister with responsibility for NHT, because NHT falls under him, this government has passed legislation twice to extend that extraction of resources each year for 10 years while they've been in office. In fact, since they came to power in 2016, they have withdrawn $114 billion from the NHT as non-tax revenue. And this continued over that period, despite Jamaica needing to increase the construction of affordable houses by 15,000 per year to satisfy the unmet demand. And despite Jamaica having left the IMF borrowing program in 2017, they have no excuse for it. Now the government, as I've said in the throne speech, has announced that it's going to extend this again for 5 more years. That means that they're going to reduce the financial base of the NHT by a further $57 billion over the next 5 years. At a time when Jamaica's housing stock in western parishes has been decimated by Melissa, these resources should be deployed by the NHT be used to rebuild resilient homes for the many thousands of households who have suffered varying degrees of damage to the houses. Many of them are NHT subscribers. This is not the time to be drawing the money out of NHT to balance the government's fiscal accounts. With a mere $30 billion, less than 1% of GDP allocated in the budget towards Melissa recovery expenditure in the coming fiscal year, the NHT should be empowered and mandated to play a much greater part in restoring resilient shelter in Western Jamaica. This is not the time to be depleting the resources of Jamaica's most important housing institution. Bad policy, Prime Minister. Bad policy. I move now, Madam Speaker. In the context of the need to drive recovery, I am concerned that the allocation of 100 billion Jamaican dollars for central government capital expenditure in the coming fiscal year is likely to be unspent, a good portion of it, given the chronic strictures of the procurement rules and other bottlenecks that have been impeding the effective execution of capital projects year after year after year. Madam Speaker, I believe it would be more effective to channel a part of these resources through the municipal corporations and agencies that operate at the community level, such as the SDC, RADA, Solid Waste and Water Commission, in executing relatively small but urgently needed tasks in the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa. These resources should be deployed to undertake the removal of fallen tree debris, restoring pedestrian walkways and footpaths, restoring fences around publicly owned properties, repairing catchment tanks, cleaning the intakes to springs, cleaning side drains and culverts, repairing broken retaining walls and other small structural repairs and the like. That would repair the environment in which we live, and I mean the living conditions around us. And it would repair the mentality of our people who have to live in squalor and decimation from Melissa. And it would help to, it would be counter-cyclical. It would help to push against the malaise that we're now in and take us out of the slump. Madam Speaker, in the quest for greater fiscal space to fund investments to drive national development, there is also another revenue strategy which urgently needs to be pursued. The design of a tax system determines its performance more than the rates of tax themselves. Where systems are fragmented, revenue leaks and is not collected. Where systems are integrated and digitally verified, compliance becomes automatic. PricewaterhouseCoopers, in their preliminary review of the budget, highlighted the importance of increasing tax compliance. And I quote, so that everyone bears their fair share rather than the burden falling on those who meet the moment and pay their taxes as part of their civic duty. End of quote. Madam Speaker, the next stage of Jamaica's economic reform should not be about increasing tax rates. That is lazy, unimaginative, and it's an approach being taken by this government which should change its path. We say no to that. It is bad economics and will be damaging to the economy and the Jamaican people in our current circumstances. I think I should remind them, it is the PNP that reduced personal income tax from 33 and a third to 25%. It's the PNP that reduced GCT from 17.5% down to 16%. So mash down that liable. We are a high tax. We don't believe in high taxes. But there are times when taxes are necessary. And it was necessary after Bruce Golding and Andrew Holness drove the economy into a precipice and we had to fix it. Increasing tax rates and putting in new taxes on the people when you're in an economic slump is bad economics and will be damaging to the economy and the Jamaican people in our current circumstances. The next stage should be about ensuring that the taxes that are already on the books, are fully and fairly realized. A revenue system should be judged by how much of what is legally due is actually collected consistently, efficiently, and equitably. Where leakage persists, compliant businesses and compliant consumers shoulder a disproportionate burden of the tax. Where there's leakage, where enforcement is episodic, occasional, arbitrary, fairness erodes. Where systems are fragmented, borrowing costs rise, and compliant taxpayers suffer. In my March 2024 budget presentation, I said this to the current Minister of Finance's predecessor. Minister, I said, the current 15th March deadline is pretty rough on everyone who has to file their taxes. Getting the past year's accounts audited and then preparing the tax returns all by the 15th March is really too much of a crunch. An April deadline could ease the pressure significantly. It's time for change. I continue. Other countries have later deadlines, which helps with their budgeting and financial planning. So why not take a leaf out of their book? It would give taxpayers who file more time to get their taxes right and would improve the accuracy of tax filings. It also improves compliance by allowing a more reasonable deadline. It would be a step towards a stronger, more stable economy. End of quote. Madam Speaker, I'm encouraged to make some further recommendations today because in February, a month ago, we passed legislation partially implementing that recommendation, partially. I say partially because the change in the filing deadline from March to April only applies to taxpayers which are corporations. Individuals and professional firms that operate as partnerships still have to file by the 15th of March. And Madam Speaker, I am encouraging the government to streamline this so that everyone benefits from the more sensible and practical April filing date. Madam Speaker, the success of the tax amnesty in the first quarter of 2025, a year ago, which collected 10.5 billion Jamaican dollars in outstanding taxes, illustrates the benefit of providing taxpayers with attractive mechanisms for coming forward voluntarily to settle outstanding tax matters and regularize their tax affairs. I support the call for a voluntary structured tax settlement program to be developed and implemented in Jamaica. It was, again, in Price Waterhouse's circular on the current budget, and I think it's a very good idea. It should be supported. Jamaica also needs to seriously pursue a structural integration of systems so that tax compliance becomes automatic rather than discretionary. Some estimates, which I have seen, suggest that the improved realization across key revenue categories could yield up to 60 billion Jamaican dollars annually without increasing any tax rates or imposing any new taxes at all. Our finance spokesperson provided a telling example on Thursday last of how $8.6 billion of this can be achieved in the coming fiscal year. And, you know, the truth is that if we had a year to roll it out, we would collect a lot more than 8.6 billion. And he conservatively puts the 8.6 billion because he recognizes that it will take some months of concerted effort, serious management of the system, backed by serious political will to make it happen. But it could be done. GCT, General Consumption Tax, is Jamaica's largest indirect tax, and it is projected to generate 330 billion Jamaican dollars in the upcoming fiscal year. And the related tax, the Special Consumption Tax, SCT, is projected to generate another $113 billion Jamaican. The system requires businesses to collect these indirect taxes at the point of sale, hold it in their cash flow temporarily for a period, and then remit it later. That time lag creates opportunity for underreporting, inflated input credits, nil returns despite commercial activity, and fraudulent refund claims. Enforcement relies heavily on audits after the fact, and these are costly and necessarily selective and unevenly applied. Many countries have addressed this, not by raising rates, but by redesigning the tax architecture. Electronic invoicing systems are now standard across much of Latin America and parts of Europe and Asia, requiring invoices to be digitally validated in near real time. Every transaction is time-stamped. Every input credit must match a verified supplier invoice. Returns are auto-populated from validated data. That shift is transformative. It moves the system from post-event enforcement to transaction-level verification. The documented increase in revenue collections from implementing these systems actually range from 5 to 15%, depending on the level of previous compliance. For Jamaica, even a conservative projection of 2% improvement in effective GCT and SCT realization would yield $8.6 billion annually as our finance in the first year. And of course, it would pick up more as we ram compliance and really get everybody to adopt the system. Madam Speaker, no GCT or SCT rate increase is required, none. Just better system design. The government will likely tell us it isn't assured and it can't be done. That's what I expect to hear from them. Well, I'm here to tell you that with political will and effective management driven by dynamic and energetic leadership, it could and should be done without delay. I will now share some other examples of how to optimize revenues over the next 3 years without increasing taxes, as we seek to finance strong recovery from Melissa and build back better. And I do so in a spirit of goodwill to all Jamaicans on both sides of the aisle. I'm not hiding it, I'm sharing it for the good of the country. I move to income tax, which is the largest tax type, projected to yield $342 billion in the upcoming fiscal year. In this case, leakage flows from artificial loss positions, profit declarations that bear little resemblance to import volumes or sector margins, weak withholding adherence, and payroll inconsistencies. This is all sources of leakage in the income tax system. The fundamental issue is structural. Tax filings are treated as isolated submissions rather than nodes in an integrated economic data network. A modern compliance system would automatically link income tax declarations to GCT turnover data, customs import declarations, payroll filings, beneficial ownership records, director compliance histories, and municipal corporation approvals of projects and so on. So, for example, if a company imports $150 million Jamaican dollars in goods but declares $20 million in turnover and a tax loss, the system would automatically flag that anomaly. A 5% improvement in effective income tax realization would yield $17 billion annually. Again, this has nothing to do with raising tax rates. It's just about aligning data and getting people to pay what they owe. I move to customs duties. Customs duties are projected to earn 78 billion Jamaican dollars in the upcoming fiscal year. And while this is a significant revenue source, the importance of international trade taxes extends beyond the port. When imports are undervalued or misclassified, GCT on imports is understated. Profit margins are distorted. Income tax collections decline. Sector comparisons become unreliable. Digital valuation tools and automated inland reconciliation can address this source of revenue leakage. Import data should inform expected turnover bands and profitability benchmarks automatically. Outliers should be visible in real time. A 10% reduction of customs leakage, a 10% reduction of customs leakage would yield $8 billion annually and would also reinforce inland compliance. I move to municipal corporation approvals. Municipal building approvals represent hundreds of billions of dollars in economic activity each year. Municipal building approvals are hundreds of billions of dollars in economic activity each year. Yet they are disconnected from tax reporting systems. A developer may construct $600 million project while filing minimal GCT returns and declaring little or no income. And I think some of us in here probably know about that. Show me can, me no can no foul. If you want to pick it up for your business. Madam Speaker, connectivity is needed. Once a building permit is issued, the approved value of the project should be logged in the tax system. And returns should be auto-populated through a project disclosure section. Expected material purchases, contractor invoices, payroll should be benchmarked. It is estimated that correcting 5% of underreporting in these activities would yield $3 billion annually. We're leaving a lot of money on the table. Some are benefiting. It is the few. The many are suffering, and it needs to be fixed. Madam Speaker, in 2024, more than 5,000 work permits were approved in Jamaica. Yet permit issuance is not systematically reconciled with payroll, filings, or statutory contributions. If a company holds 10 active work permits but files payroll for only 10 employees, that discrepancy should trigger an automated review. Fixing this could generate $250 million annually, reinforcing a simple principle that every compliance node must connect. It's about connectivity. In summary, Madam Speaker, if well executed and taken together, these systematic reforms could yield additional revenue per year of close to 2% of GDP without increasing taxes. This is not incremental reform. It represents additional fiscal space of 10% of GDP over 5 years. It is achievable not by increasing the tax burden, but by being smarter in how we utilize the architecture of the tax system. Reform to improve the integrity of the tax system is not punitive. It promotes economic fairness. It promotes economic fairness. It protects compliant businesses from being undercut by non-compliant competitors. It narrows bureaucratic discretion. It shrinks the space for corruption. It strengthens investor confidence. It increases fairness. Madam Speaker, Jamaica does not need higher tax rates. It needs systems where invoices validate themselves, where payroll reconciles with permits, where imports reconcile with profits, where billing approvals inform tax returns, where risk detection becomes structural rather than episodic. So, Madam Speaker, we think that revenue integrity should be a priority on the fiscal agenda, rather than burdening the population with new taxes in an economic slump, which is what this government is doing. The opportunity is measurable, international precedent is clear, and the fiscal dividend would be very substantial indeed. Madam Speaker, I move to a different subject. The massive Category 5 Hurricane Melissa is now estimated, as I've said, to have caused loss and damage to Jamaica amounting to US $12.2 billion, 2 trillion Jamaican dollars, 56% of our annual GDP, and it has set back Jamaica for years to come. The cost that lies ahead to rebuild and insure against recurring Category 5 and strong storms will be very heavy also. So the question arises, Can and will Jamaica have to bear this loss alone, this massive cost for destruction to which we contributed so little? Yeah. Category 5, Melissa, was not happenstance. It was not an accident. It was a result of decades of certain countries in the world, in the global community, stubbornly resisting scientific consensus that their carbon-releasing activities were leading to catastrophic changes in global climate. They chose to continue substantially unchanged, allowing fossil fuel-based economies to continue unabated, while effectively exporting the climate-related costs to less developed and vulnerable nations like ours and other small island developing states. In earlier times, Madam Speaker, Jamaica was known to have one major hurricane, that's category 4 or above, roughly every 40 years. However, in the 37 years since Hurricane Gilbert in 1988, Jamaica has experienced 4 such systems. There were 2 category 4 hurricanes, Ivan in 2004 and Dean in 2007, then 2 category 5 hurricanes in successive years, Beryl in 2024 and the catastrophic Melissa in 2025. Hurricanes Ivan, Dean, and Beryl caused loss and damage to Jamaica of US $1.079 billion at that time. That was the estimate. Outside of some important voluntary contributions from third parties, which we honor and welcome, Jamaica has borne the cost of the expenditures relating to these disasters. Financing, mainly through loans, incurs interest and capital repayment, as well as sometimes conditionalities that fetter our room for maneuver. Jamaica has had to absorb these costs substantially on our own because, firstly, the link between CO2 carbon emissions and climate change was not firmly established at that time. And secondly, the legal, scientific, negotiating, technical, and administrative capabilities were not in place to do anything about it. And thirdly, the international legal framework was still in negotiation. Madam Speaker, Hurricane Melissa has created a potentially game-changing shift. Among other things, firstly, Melissa did not follow the historical pattern of these major systems. It was a tropical storm which, while meandering slowly, almost stationary in the Caribbean, intensified rapidly in these waters, where sea temperatures have reached 1.4 degrees above pre-industrial levels, and then it moved directly to Jamaica. It is generally accepted that Melissa's peculiar intensification and power were a climate-related phenomenon. Secondly, Hurricane Melissa struck Jamaica about 4 months after the International Court of Justice, the World Court, had issued a unanimous advisory judgment that states can be held liable for damages caused by climate change. Now, Jamaica has been a minimal emitter of greenhouse gases that have caused global warming, yet we are bearing the pain from the irresponsible and selfish actions of others. This is fundamentally unjust and unprincipled. As a major victim of the effects of climate disasters, Jamaica cannot remain docile and just passively assume a mountain of additional climate-related debt that will fetter and postpone our national development for decades to come. Our country has a duty to lead in its advocacy for fair and just compensation. Fair and just compensation from those states who have put us and others like us in this position of extreme vulnerability. In our interests, in our own interests, and out of a duty to other vulnerable countries like ours, which continue to bear the loss and damage from climate change and will continue to bear it, should now assemble a team of the most experienced legal experts and prepare a legal brief on the possibility of recovering compensation for the loss and damage inflicted on us by Melissa. The ICJ, the International Court of Justice, opened the door last year, and we must push that door further open. Madam Speaker, the legal brief should consider the prospects of a case being taken to the International Court of Justice, relying on the responsibility of certain countries for the global temperature increases that resulted in the damage wrought by Hurricane Melissa, A decision of the International Court on this issue would be binding on the states found liable for the overheating that triggered Hurricane Melissa. That decision, which would be of considerable economic value for Jamaica, may possibly be obtained pursuant to the contentious jurisdiction of the International Court. It is not beyond imagination that this could be done, and we owe a duty to other countries and ourselves to see if it's possible. Alternatively, but in the same solutions-oriented spirit, the government of Jamaica should assume a leadership position to encourage the United Nations General Assembly to seek the International Court's opinion on the levels of compensation that major contributors to global overheating may be called upon to pay for loss and damage caused to individual countries by changing weather patterns. In the matter of loss and damage caused by the climatic effects of global warming, surely the law and equity are on the side of small developing states that have not contributed in any significant way to this phenomenon. It is the states which are responsible for major fossil fuel emissions who are causing the loss and damage from monster hurricanes like Melissa. As these major states have caused the damage, then it is fitting that they should make reparations for it. This is in keeping with general principles of state responsibility in international law, as well as rules implicit in various treaties on climate change and that are in force today. I commend this to the government and ask them to explore it. We cannot just sit back and have a 56% hit to our economy for something that we didn't cause and that was clearly climate-related, and just we'll just borrow the money and move on. We're not moving on. We're going to have to pay that debt back. And we owe a duty to the countries of the world that are in a position like ours, and to ourselves, because it could happen again, to push the needle. Jurisprudence is not fixed in time. It can evolve. And the door was opened last year. Madam Speaker, while on the topic of international relations, I noticed the Prime Minister's exhortation to fellow CARICOM leaders to adopt a foreign policy of, in quotes, principled realism. I wondered uneasily to myself what that potentially self-contradictory concept means to him. And it wasn't long before its first manifestation emerged when the Jamaican government unilaterally terminated the 50-year Cuban medical assistance program. That is what the foreign minister, having told Parliament that this decision had nothing to do with pressure from the US. That is what she said in this Parliament, that decision had nothing to do with pressure from the US. A few days later, had her ministry subsequently issue a statement affirming that it is widely known, in quotes, that the US has publicly raised concerns with the program, before articulating what I regard as unconvincing reasons as the purported justification for terminating a program that has done so much to help Jamaicans to have access to quality health services, and the termination of which has left a very substantial unfilled gap in healthcare delivery, especially in underserved areas. Now I say, if you operate, Prime Minister, you operate in fora which I don't. So there may be things that you're aware of that I am not. But before you make a move like that, you have to put other things in place. You can't terminate an agreement that the Jamaican people are relying on and have nothing in place and be scrambling around while people are suffering. Again, poor government, mismanagement. And Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, for the record, we, and I believe all of us in this House, on both sides, thank the government and people of Jamaica for their 50 years of valuable... I'm going to start again. For the record, we in this House, and I believe on both sides, thank the government and people of Cuba for their 50 years of valuable and selfless service to the Jamaican people. And we join with other Jamaicans who regard this so-called principled realism as an act, really, of a response to external pressure in a way that has been at the expense of the Jamaican people. Preparatory work should have been put in place before you made a move like that, and it was not. Madam Speaker, it has been 5 months since Melissa devastated our island home. A storm of unforgiving force. Melissa carved her name into the history of our nation. While the most impacted parts of the island were from Manchester heading west through St. Elizabeth and Westmoreland on the south coast, and from St. Anne heading west through Trelawney and St. James and Hanover on the north coast, other sections across central and eastern Jamaica also suffered serious damage, and that's often overlooked. When you visit the badly affected areas, the evidence of Melissa's wrath remains very much before your eyes. Today, I do not come to this house to merely catalogue the damage, though the numbers that we have quoted are sobering. I come to speak about something more powerful than the storm. I come to speak about the spirit of the Jamaican people, more powerful than the storm. I have walked through the rubble and debris in Black River and in White House. I have stood in flooded, carcass-littered fields in St. Elizabeth and Westmoreland. I have listened to traumatized ladies in the shelter at Petersfield High School. I've walked with families through devastated housing schemes like Edmund Ridge, Estuary, and Catherine Hall in St. James. I've talked with mothers in Hanover who lost their roofs from their homes. Their lives have been dealt a serious setback, but their hope remains intact. I have seen what the official reports do not capture: the incredible bravery of so many unsung heroes during the passing of the storm, who risked their lives to save the elderly and the weak, neighbors sharing their last meal, churches who lost their roofs still willing to provide a helping hand to those in need, communities caring and sharing, not as individuals, but as one Jamaican people. I also saw the spirit of Jamaicans who are not affected directly by the storm, but who stepped up in a massive way. They filled barrels, boxes, planes, bags, trucks, cars, and headed to the worst affected areas to help. Our entertainment community were beacons of hope and help. And I want to big up the likes of Shaggy, Sean Paul, Spice, Buju, Bounty, Shensia, Russian, Kemar, Romich, and so many more. I want to big up NGOs like Food for the Poor, Hanover Charities, World Food Kitchen, and several others who have played a massive part, helping to fill the gaps that the state did not respond to. And then there are our extraordinary Jamaican people, at home and abroad, who lent a helping hand week after week to their brothers and sisters during a very frightening and difficult experience. We say to all of them, thank you. Thank you. Madam Speaker, a storm can take a roof or blow down a house, but it cannot break the spirit of a determined and resilient people. Our people remain unbroken, and so too does our resolve. We will not simply rebuild what was, we must build back better than before. This is not just a slogan. It must be a covenant, a solemn commitment that the hardship that our people have endured will not be wasted and allowed to repeat itself again. We must use this moment of crisis as the catalyst for transformation. The homes we rebuild must be able to withstand the next major storm. The roads we repair and restore must not just wash away with the next serious flood rain. Our party is committed to policies and programs that will build an economy that works for every Jamaican, not just the privileged few. In this post-Melissa period, every policy that I outline today, every program that I propose is measured against one question: does it help build us back better than before? That's the question. Does it help us build back better than before? The state has a fundamental responsibility to the people of Jamaica amidst the devastation and loss suffered by so many. Resilience without resources is rhetoric, mere rhetoric. The people need more than speeches. They need prompt and effective action. They need a government that shows up and steps up and fixes what is broken. And that plan's not just for the next election, but for the next generation. That's what the people need. So how do we... Yes, I will. So how do we pay for recovery while maintaining fiscal discipline? I have been in Parliament long enough, nearly 20 years now, between the Senate and the House, to know that promises without numbers are just noise. The PNP understands that every dollar spent must be generated by sustainable sources of revenue and fully accounted for. It was the PNP that enacted the current form of the fiscal responsibility framework. We did that, not you. You went partway, we took it to where it is now. It was the last PNP administration that stabilized the economy, which others, including you, Prime Minister, had left in ruins. We did not abandon fiscal discipline in a crisis. We didn't do that. We applied it with greater discernment and precision. Because building back better than before requires not just vision, but the credibility to finance that vision responsibly. The hurricane has damaged our infrastructure, but it must not damage our future. We must manage our resources with the care of a good mother, how she manages her household, knowing that recklessness today means greater problems tomorrow. However, in a sharp downturn like the one we are faced now, after a calamity that has damaged the nation's productive capacity, fiscal responsibility does not mean bookkeeping. It doesn't mean excessive fiscal conservatism in this time. It means judicious fiscal decision-making. It means sensible prioritization. It means ensuring that every dollar we spend on public works creates lasting value, not temporary relief that washes away with the next heavy rains. That is what building back better than before demands. When I look at the estimates of expenditure that were tabled in February, I have to ask, where is the vision for recovery and reconstruction? Where is the strategy to guarantee that the houses we rebuild will stand for generations? We are offering not just criticism, but a credible alternative. Resilience built in, not added on. And this must be done while protecting the fiscal gains that Jamaicans have sacrificed so much to achieve. They're not your successes or our successes. They are the people of Jamaica's successes. Those are the ones that have delivered us where we are now. And so I'm going to just go through some of our ideas around how we should proceed. Madam Speaker, there is no development without energy. Energy. Jamaica's economic development is being retarded by the high cost of energy. Jamaicans pay some of the highest electricity prices in our region. This is not a fact that we must accept. This is a problem that we must solve. There will be no affordable energy without competent, bold leadership. To power our recovery and a more productive and competitive economy, we must build back better than before. The current license with the Jamaica Public Service Company expires in 2027. This is just around the corner. The next license must be negotiated with one overriding objective: to reduce the cost of electricity for Jamaican households and businesses. That is central to being able to build back better than before. The transition to renewable energy has to be accelerated. Jamaica is blessed with ample sources of solar, wind, and other renewable energy. They are cleaner, they are cheaper. And as the current war rages in the Middle East, Jamaica remains way too vulnerable to external shocks that cause sharp, painful, and economically debilitating spikes in the price of oil and gas that we import to fuel our imbalanced energy sector. And I have to remind the House, it was us who passed the Electricity Act in 2015 to modernize the framework. aspects of it have not been rolled out all now. Certain codes have not been developed and so on. And we were the ones who established the General Procurement Office to ensure that new projects to build out productive capacity in the energy sector could be done transparently and efficiently. But it has been an absolute disaster, the way you've managed it over the last 10 years. There have been for 8 years, there was no RFP issued. And we've been stagnant in the same mix, essentially, other than the projects that were initiated under us and came to fruition a few years after. You should be issuing utility-scale requests for proposals every 2 or 3 years, ensuring a steady pipeline of new generation capacity. This modern, forward-looking approach is how we would build back better than before. You also need to seriously tackle the social dimension of energy poverty. Tens of thousands of Jamaican households remain informal customers, living in fear of fires and disconnection. Our electricity empowerment program would help low-income houses and households regularize their connections with support for rewiring, inspection, and solar panel installation. We've been calling for this for several years now. You made a small start last year. It's kind of faltered. In my own constituency, I was one of the first people to write in with a proposal for the program that was announced last year to be rolled out in my constituency. I've heard nothing since. You also, I should say that our electricity empowerment program would help low-income houses regularize connections, supporting rewiring, inspection, and solar panel installation. This is not just about reducing electricity theft. It is about restoring dignity and security in people's homes. It's about bringing everyone into the light, safely and affordably. That is building back better than before. Madam Speaker, looking at the health sector, Jamaica's hospitals in the public health system are in a shockingly bad state. Corridors are filled with patients. Vital equipment either doesn't exist or is not in good working order. The staff are doing the work of 3 people each with the resources of 1. The crisis in our public health system has now been compounded by the decision of this government to terminate the Cuban arrangement. For the past century, half a century, healthcare workers from Cuba have served side by side with our own professionals in our hospitals, in our clinics, under a bilateral agreement that facilitated cooperation, and that has stood the test. That bilateral agreement has been continued on under governments on both sides. At the time when our emergency departments are overflowing, when our operating theatres sit idle for lack of staff or bits of equipment that aren't working, when our nurses are immigrating in such high numbers, this government has chosen to send home, a couple of hundred Cuban doctors and nurses who are on the ground, working in public health facilities and serving our people. That is not building better than before, unless you have something in place to replace it, which you don't. So I say, why not roll out a national health insurance scheme, beginning with full coverage for our most vulnerable? Children from birth to 18 years, seniors 65 years and older, and persons with disabilities. Start with them. This expansion of coverage should be a cornerstone of building back better than before. If it can't be done in this fiscal year, then do it in next. But get started. It requires a lot of work to do it. We heard about some task force being tasked with developing the proposal. That's years ago, and not a word since. So much talk and so little action. Madam Speaker, you guys, your side, should prioritize functioning diagnostic services in every public hospital. Functioning. No patient should have to wait for an ambulance to transport them elsewhere for a CT scan. No parish should lack basic radiology capacity. We would ensure that every parish hospital has diagnostic equipment that is working, maintained properly, and staffed adequately. That is what a modern health system looks like, and that is building back better than before. You know, and we have this Cornwall regional debacle going into its umpteenth year. I don't know how many years since that project started with a $2 billion budget. 20-odd billion, we don't even know the current numbers, and it can't done, it can't finish. Now they talk about some dome as a stopgap measure. Well, yeah, great, but finish the project, man. We need proper accountability. Somebody should be held responsible for the mother of all overruns. Madam Speaker, prevention is better than cure. And prevention requires accessible primary care. You should bring healthcare closer to the people who need it most. We will be upgrading community clinics, extending opening hours and installing better equipment. That is building back better than before. You need to restore morale in the health service by restoring respect for those who deliver the service. You should be compensating healthcare workers fairly and providing them with housing support through the National Housing Trust and ensuring that they have the tools that they need to do the job. A stronger, more resilient health system requires stronger, better supported workforce. That is building back better than before. Too many of our people are leaving our shores in healthcare, in education, in all the professions because they're not being adequately looked at. And it just needs a proper retention plan with some creative thinking. We have come up with that. We've given them a load of ideas as to how to do that. No, they don't do anything. Just talk. Just talk. Madam Speaker, a nation that does not properly educate its children cannot achieve its development goals. Jamaica has a crisis in education with well-documented unacceptable underachievement at the primary and secondary levels, leading to a low rate of tertiary level qualification, and that helps to keep our economy weak and unproductive and uncompetitive. Hurricane Melissa has only made that crisis worse. Damaged schools, poor access roads, disrupted families, heightened economic pressures have pushed absenteeism to unacceptable levels. I heard today where a senior police officer in one of the affected parishes was saying there's some 400 students who are missing from the system. In one parish alone. In one parish alone, 400. That was in today's news. My goodness. Thousands of our children cannot attend school 5 days a week because they cannot afford transportation or a daily meal. This has to be addressed head-on. Madam Speaker, importing 110 old buses for 1.4 billion Jamaican dollars for rural student transportation without following any competitive procurement procedure has, within a few months, been shown to be a very bad decision, if not worse. If not worse. We told you that from the very beginning. Now, after $1.4 billion of purchasing these old buses and another $871 million in operating expenses with a revenue model that has not worked at all, you say that you're switching to new buses. All I can say is, what a tangled web you weave when you practice to deceive. Madam Speaker, our plan would have given the people the Rural Initiative for Delivering Education, we call it RIDE, to provide transportation subsidies, initially for 20,000 vulnerable primary and secondary students who are outside of the JUTC network. We would be partnering with vetted, licensed transport operators and schools to deliver a cash-free, transparent system with the objective of ensuring that no child is left at home because of transportation challenges. We would have started with that. That is building back better than before. We all know a hungry child cannot learn, an undernourished child cannot concentrate. You should be ensuring that every child who needs a meal at school receives one every single school day. We would be rolling out the Ensuring Adequate Sustenance for Education program, EASE, to expand school nutritional support for 245,000 children. That would be building back better than before. You should be making sure the children learn, not leaving so many to suffer in illiteracy. Our plan would be tackling the systemic underperformance by investing in teacher training, smaller classes, modern learning techniques and materials. We would be relentlessly prioritizing the fundamentals of reading, writing, and arithmetic and cognitive skills. You have just started to scratch the surface. Thank God for a few private sector and NGO operators who are showing the way in how to address the issue. But it must start early in the school system, not when they're already way past the age that they should be and can't read and write. You should be also addressing the historic deficits of self-esteem, self-love, personal discipline, and a sense of responsibility for others. You should be ensuring our children understand who they are, the greatness of their past and their potential, and what it means to be a citizen of Jamaica. We would be tackling adverse social behaviors head-on by embedding the teachings of the right excellent Marcus Messiah Garvey in the national curriculum and restoring civics education fully. We will be expanding programs for children with special needs, which is a huge problem in the country. Madam Speaker, a respected and motivated teacher is a retained teacher, someone who stays in the system. And a retained teacher is a gift to our nation that keeps on giving for generations. I have to ask, where is your teacher retention plan? You should be encouraging teachers to stay in the system by providing student debt reductions, motor vehicle concessions that increase with years of service, and other things that we have been telling you to do, which are eminently doable, which would make a big difference to the lives of our teachers, increase retention, and you're not doing it. You should be prioritizing our teachers when it comes to National Housing Trust allocations of houses. You should be negotiating package deals for teachers to get free internet service as a tool of their trade. You should be valuing our educators by practical policies that improve their quality of life. That is building back better than before. Madam Speaker, only about, I think it's 21% of the eligible population is enrolled in tertiary education, only 21%. And only 15% of the total workforce holds formal tertiary level qualification, 15%. Jamaica cannot move up the value chain and create an economy that delivers wealth for all our people without expanding access to tertiary education and training. Can't be done. You should be doing something about this, but you're failing the people. We would roll out the First in Family Scholarship Program, providing full scholarships for the first person in a family to attend university or college. And our spokesperson for education should take a bow. It was his creative thinking that put that on the table. I want to big him up for that. With the benefit of that investment in their socio-economic upliftment, they could then help their brothers and sisters to do the same. Madam Speaker, education should lift people up, not weigh them down. Education should lift people up, not weigh them down. Too many graduates are suffering under the weight of student debt. You need to do more for them. We would have capped Student Loan Bureau loan repayments at a manageable percentage of the borrower's income. We would have suspended their payment obligations during periods of unemployment, taking the risk of economic malaise off of the student and onto the state where it belongs. And we would not have charged them penalties for that suspension of their obligation. We believe that creating accessible transition from education to employment is building back better than before. We commend our ideas to you. Madam Speaker, Hurricane Melissa did not only destroy homes, it damaged livelihoods. Our farmers, already struggling with low technology, limited financial assistance, limited technical support, lost crops and livestock, lost greenhouses and other structures, and months of invested labor and capital gone. They are suffering. But in every crisis, there lies an opportunity. The opportunity before us is to transform Jamaican agriculture into a modern, resilient, productive sector. That is how to build back better than before. I'm sure you agree. You need to get more serious about building agriculture as a pillar of the economy. Investing in our farmers is building back better than before. We would have established an agricultural development fund financed by a reallocation of a portion of existing import taxes on foreign food and investing those import taxes in our own production and our own farmers and uplifting them. That's what we would have done. We would use it to support land preparation, irrigation, storage, and marketing for local farmers. We would be reducing post-harvest losses from 30% to 20% or less in 5 years. We would be expanding irrigation from the current 18% of arable land to at least 25%. Water security enhances food security, and that is building back better than before. Madam Speaker, you should be deepening on that side, should be deepening and strengthening the linkages between farmers and consumers. The school feeding program should prioritize locally grown, nutritious food. Empower our farmers and feed our children. Hotels and restaurants should be encouraged and supported to buy Jamaican. It's hardly happening. Special economic zones should be established for agriculture. Special economic zones should be established for agriculture, focusing on export crops where we have a competitive advantage. And there are several where we have a competitive advantage. But production levels are so low compared to even 20 years ago. Agriculture is really not going where it needs to go. For example, yam, spices, orchard crops, and medicinal cannabis. I hope you make a difference in that area, because your predecessors have been hopeless. I'm really looking forward to seeing you make some progress. Want to see action. Creating these linkages and markets would be building back better than before. In my 2024 budget presentation, I spoke to the need for greater transparency and rationality in how food import permits are allocated. Imported produce that competes with local farmers raises serious issues of fairness, as the playing field is not level when farmers in North America and Europe benefit from massive state subsidies alongside other advantages such as economies of scale. The system of granting import permits is also conducive of corruption. At that time, when I said it, onion imports were causing losses to farmers when there was ample local supply. It is distressing to read in the media once again of a large onion farmer thinking of giving up agriculture and going into another, in the minister's well, there you go, going into another profession because of the market being undermined by cheap imports. Madam Speaker, this is not just bad policy. It is infected with nepotism. I have seen the customs declaration for an imported shipment of 1,300 bags of onions brought in by a communications company owned by a JLP activist and former MP. I've seen it. I can share it with you if you want to see it. The system of granting import permits needs to be overhauled and put on a transparent footing. And Madam Speaker, priority must be given to importers that represent and support the affected farmers, not politically connected margin gatherers. If you get the privilege of making money out of imported food, those profits should be in the agricultural sector to help build it. Madam Speaker, in the context of this discussion on food security, it is also worth pointing out a peculiar vulnerability of the Jamaican economy, which is our abnormal dependence on remittances. Remittances provide currently some $3.5 billion US of financing to the Jamaican people each year. With 100% retention in the local economy, unlike tourism, and the direct support that it provides lower-income families, this is the largest, most important, and most impactful source of foreign exchange available in Jamaica, remittances. Remittances are a vital buffer in times of crisis. During the pandemic, when other large foreign exchange earners dried up as international travel ceased, our balance of payments remained largely unaffected, and the exchange rate remained stable because of the increase in remittances, which effectively rebalanced the current account of the country. Similarly, after Melissa struck, in December 2025, net remittance flows of $315.3 million US represented a 13.6% increase over the same month in the prior year, helping to fund the revaluation of our currency, which has taken place since December. And that has helped to keep inflation below what the Bank of Jamaica had originally projected after the storm. And in fact, I think the inflation numbers for February were just published, and again, it's below the lower band of the inflation target of 3.9%. Even in normal times, remittances help to sustain our current account balance and finance our imports, including $1.4 billion of food imports, which amount to nearly 20% of total imports, something which we cannot continue to allow. It's not sustainable, and it is depriving value added and wealth creation in our economy. But we have to big up and give thanks to the Jamaican diaspora for their commitment to their home country. And their families backyard. Their role in our economy is fundamental, and they deserve to be treated as worthy partners and facilitated in their participation in national development. At the same time, we must acknowledge that over the medium to long term, remittance flows are vulnerable to external shocks. We can't assume we'll always have that. We are seeing this with the recent 1% tax on certain remittances in the US, which came into effect in January, the intensification of deportations from the US. Madam Speaker, as generations evolve from persons who were born here to their descendants whose ties to Jamaica are necessarily less direct, it will also have an impact. This means that in building back better, we must be mindful of the strategic imperative of reducing our dependency on imported food and imported energy, and drive a fundamental shift towards greater production to meet our population's needs for energy and food. Time come for that. We have been dragging our feet too long. Madam Speaker, the images that emerged after Melissa will stay with us for years. Families sifting through rubble, children sleeping in schoolrooms, community centers, elderly persons exposed to the elements. Housing is not just about shelter, it is about dignity. And too many Jamaicans have been denied dignity for too long. When we rebuild, we cannot just rebuild the same vulnerable structures. We have to build back better than before. The housing deficit stands at nearly 200,000 units, yet only 2,300 homes have been built annually by the NHT over the past decade. 21% of our population lives in informal settlements. This is not merely another statistic. This is a national failure of epic proportions. 21% of our population live in informal settlements. You should be incentivizing development in deep rural communities. You should be offering relocation grants to teachers and healthcare workers to serve in those areas. We would be building at least 500 new houses per term in rural constituencies, and we would prioritize public sector workers and persons with disabilities in the allocation of those houses. That would build back those communities better than before. Madam Speaker, the government must end the annual extraction of $11.4 billion from the National Housing Trust. When it was implemented, it was for 4 years. That should have ended in 2017. 9 years later, it's still going on, and they've announced that they're going to continue for another 5 on top of that. Our spokesperson for finance has shown how we would finance this in a fiscally responsible way, so you don't have to take it anymore. That money should once again be used for housing, not for plugging the government's fiscal accounts. Creating new, affordable home ownership is the only way we ensure that Jamaicans who are toiling day and night to get ahead actually have the opportunity to own their own home. You are failing as a government to meet the affordable housing needs of the people. That is undeniable. Undeniable. That is why we would have established the Young Owners Deposit Fund out of the resources of the NHT to provide grants of $500,000 to first-time home owners under the age of 45 who have contributed to NHT for at least 2 years. That would have helped them to get on the housing ownership ladder. It is why we'll be granting new home buyers a 3-month grace period after their home purchase, before their mortgage payments begin, so they have breathing room to fix up the house and furnish the house. It is why we would have rolled out the rent-to-own program so that self-employed and informally employed Jamaicans can become homeowners. After 6 months of consistently paying rent, they would be qualifying for an NHT mortgage. We'd also allow a portion of their rent to count towards their deposit, creating a clear pathway from tenancy to ownership. That would be building back better than before. And for public health and public sector workers, we would restore the specially reduced interest rates on their NHT loans, and we would also apply a preferential 40% debt service ratio to allow them to qualify for larger loans. That's part of our retention strategy, especially for teachers, nurses, and so on. Recognizing their service with tangible support is the right thing to do in building back better. Madam Speaker, land is the source of wealth. Land ownership is a cornerstone of national identity. Yet so many Jamaicans, far too many, live on land that they don't own, unable to access credit, can't finance anything, unable to build equity in their property, unable to pass anything on to their children in any safe and secure way. You need to address the conditions faced by hundreds of thousands of Jamaicans who are living in informal settlements. You need to do it. We would be regularizing informal settlements across Jamaica, completing all the unfinished Operation Pride schemes, and upgrading older communities with proper sidewalks, drainage, and green spaces. We'd be replacing zinc fences with concrete walls, not just for cosmetic reasons, but for living in dignity. We would call this our Portia program, in honor of Jamaica's first female Prime Minister. Nobody can take that from her. Sister P always stood up for those who need help. Transforming our communities with proper infrastructure is building back better than before. And Madam Speaker, land policy must create intergenerational security for the Jamaican people. I'm going to repeat that. Land policy must create intergenerational security for the Jamaican people. Families who have built homes and lived on land for generations, public land, should not live in fear of eviction. They never got any reparations after slavery. They never got any land. The law and the state must provide the accessible pathway for them to become owners. You are doing nothing about it. Our land policy would change it. We would ensure that when it comes to land ownership, we build back better, with a more cohesive society than before. We would amend the law to reduce the period required for adverse possession of government land from 60 years to 25 years initially, and we could possibly take it lower than that over time. Even while we are in opposition, we are determined to move this forward because we see it as fundamental. I have done with my team the preparatory research and the drafting work. We have prepared a bill to implement this vital social justice reform. That bill will seek to amend 3 pieces of legislation. The Limitation of Actions Act, which is over 100 years old. The Registration of Titles Act, which is also over 100 years old. And the Cadastral Mapping and Tenure Clarification Special Provisions Act, which is a big mouthful, but it deals with land titling. I will be tabling that bill as a private member's bill after this budget debate, and I'm going to seek support from both sides of the aisle for this reform. Madam Speaker, and where possession is well established, but the 25-year threshold has not yet been met by the person on the land, we would facilitate purchase and titling for them at affordable prices with concessionary payment terms. We need to make owners out of the Jamaican people so that they have a piece of the rock. This is social justice, which is a fundamental aspiration of our political movement. That is building back better than before. Madam Speaker, after 10 years in government, what have you done about beach access in Jamaica? More and more beaches are being taken away from the public. Our people are crying out for access to the beaches of the island. You've been dragging your feet on this issue for years. Your policy is stuck in the usual multiple announcements phase. You know, this is announced, and then it's announced, and it's announced. It's a bit like that project in St. Thomas there, where it's open when it's not even, no proper infrastructure. I'm sure it's going to be open a few more times. I see some public bodies have now signed with a big smile on their face to go in there, and it's not even ready. We would use the law to guarantee public access while balancing legitimate tourism and private interests. No Jamaican should be barred from the foreshore. Restoring our people's connection to our national heritage should be part of building back better than before. It's very critical. Madam Speaker, Hurricane Melissa left Jamaica's already appalling rural road network in an even more deplorable condition. Farmers in St. Thomas can't get their produce to market. Children in Portland struggle to get to school. Patients in St. Elizabeth suffer in trying to reach health centers. Fixing the road network is an important national priority. It must be done properly to build back better than before. It must place climate resilience at the core. It means proper drainage systems, not pitchy-patchy repairs that don't stand up to the next heavy rains. Culvert and drainage systems designed for climate conditions. Madam Speaker, after 10 years, the government has failed to deliver a comprehensive road maintenance plan. I mean, that's undeniable. We had the road maintenance fund. They terminated that fund. That was a dedicated fund that was supposed to ensure that Jamaica had a proper road maintenance plan. They took it away, used it to guarantee some loan from overseas for some program, and never put anything back in its place. And there was no proper road maintenance plan or policy for years and years and years. And the road network is in a shambles. Now you say that you want to create a one-road authority. You're talking about one-road authority. Madam Speaker, I am not against streamlining responsibilities. I am not against promoting best practices. I'm not against quality assurance. These are important things. However, local authorities must be empowered to execute robust road repair and maintenance programs in each parish. That is a must. That is a must. We would treat road maintenance as a permanent commitment by establishing a divisional road maintenance fund and allocating at least 15 million per division annually for local road maintenance to be administered through the local authorities. And special provision needs to be made for farm roads. When a farmer can't get yam to Coronation Market, or when a truck can't reach a rural agro-processing centre or the market in Montego Bay, it undermines food security, and we all pay the price. The road from the farm to the fork must be passable, reliable, and resilient. We would include a further amount of at least $5 million annually per division in rural areas to maintain farm-to-market roads. That would be building back better than before. And by doing it through the local governance network, you're empowering local communities. It would avoid the pitfalls of centralized bureaucracy. It would empower local people with local knowledge to fix local roads on a timely basis. This places accountability where it belongs in the hands of local communities and their local representatives. That would be building up better than before. So when you come with the One Road Authority, I ask that that be a part of its design. Now, it can't be centralizing everything, because that's just going to create a bottleneck like the Ministry of Economic Growth and Infrastructure Development. Madam Speaker, I now turn to the cultural and creative economy, which is not merely an economic sector, but the very heartbeat of our nation. The contraction in tourism, the closure of hospitals and hotels and restaurants, the cancellation of cultural tours, all since Melissa, has disrupted the cultural economy of the tourism belt. Community recreation and entertainment, the fish fries and round robins that keep our community alive have taken a hit. And now we hear that Sumfest moving from Mobay, and it's going to be one night in St. Anne. That's a big hit for Mobay. Over recent months, we have had to say farewell to too many of our cultural icons. The great Jimmy Cliff, who helped to make reggae music an international genre and carried a message of liberation to the world stage. He has left us. We have lost two truly great musicians in Sly Dunbar and Cat Core. We have lost Max Romeo and Cocotte, two much-loved voices in our genre. They've passed. These were not only entertainers, they were architects of our national identity, ambassadors of our culture, and chroniclers of our lived experience. We honor their memory. It is in this context that I renew my call, made in this House repeatedly over the past years, for the conferral of the Order of National Hero on the Honourable Robert Nesta Marley and the Honourable Louise Bennett Coverley. Bob Marley is not just Jamaica's most famous entertainer, musician, performer. He is a global symbol of one love, of unity, of resistance to oppression in all its forms. His legacy continues to grow and inspire all peoples of the world. He is deserving of our highest national honor. His 80th birthday has passed. The government must act. Miss Lou's pioneering performances and poetry in the Jamaican language provided deeper consciousness and self-affirmation of our cultural identity and uplifted our national confidence. She should be recognized as our second female national heroine. Madam Speaker, in building back better, you must ensure that our artists, our musicians, and our other creatives have access to financing, have access to training, and have access to markets. Right now, they're too often on their own. We would establish a $1 billion revolving creative economy fund to support our creative practitioners in the entertainment, in arts, in fashion, in culture. Investing in our globally competitive cultural assets will help to build back better than before. Madam Speaker, the current system for obtaining permits for entertainment events is fragmented, frustrating, and often unfair, especially in communities that are stigmatized, like some that I represent. The system needs to be made simple, it needs to be transparent, and it needs to be fair. Why haven't you fixed this after 10 years? We need less talk and more action. Our plan would have seen us establish a single window, one-stop permit system for entertainment event applications, transparent and fair. We would build back a cultural economy better than before, because when we invest in our culture, we nourish the heart and soul of Jamaica. We recognize the importance of culture and the creative industries in general, and the entertainment sector in particular, in providing livelihoods and driving commerce at the base of the economy. It is a very important sector. Madam Speaker, I move to small business. If you want to gauge the buoyancy of the Jamaican economy, look at the stock market under this government. This government has presided over 5 years of dormant valuations, sluggish listings, diminishing returns, and wealth. But what about the market vendor, the corner shop owner, the mechanic, the hairdresser, the small contractor? These should be the real engines of our economy, but they are struggling. You must empower MSMEs with concrete, practical support. Jamaica's informal economy has been estimated at 40% of the overall economy. This inhibits, I remind you that in 2015, Jamaica had the best performing stock exchange in the world. Don't forget that, because you like to revise history. But we're not letting you do it. Jamaica's informal economy has been estimated at 40% of our total economy. This inhibits national development, because informality is a restriction on the scope for business expansion. These businesses are often excluded from the financial system and from opportunities to build market share, and it contributes to our weak economic growth. The informal economy, Madam Speaker, the informal economy is large, not because Jamaicans want to be outside the system, but because the barriers to formalization are high and the incentives to do so are unreachable. The cost of compliance when MSMEs seek to formalize, both in terms of fees, in terms of effort, are burdensome. Too many of Jamaica's bureaucratic systems are business unfriendly. Even government programs for MSME support that are announced and funded year after year have failed to have the desired impact. Their design and the requirements imposed fail to take the limited capacity of MSMEs into account. And so we don't have transformation. We don't have transition to a better economy. You must lower these costs and remove these barriers. That's your job. That is what we would be doing. That's what we would be doing. We would offer a 3-year tax holiday for businesses once they formalize their operations. We would provide discounted government registration, permit, and licensing fees for doing business throughout the same period for new businesses coming into the fold. We would be building back better than before and empowering the economy at the base. This government, and every government, spends billions of dollars annually on goods and services. Small businesses should get their share. The law to allow this has been in place since 2019. We modernized the procurement system with the Public Procurement Act. Regulations took a long time to come after we did that. 2019, they came with provisions for setbacks and margins of appreciation for vulnerable and underserved groups, etc. 2019, nothing has been done to make it happen. 7 years later, you're saying you want to do it now. Well, let's see. This cannot be just mere talk and more of the same. You should be proactive in pushing these arrangements to favor MSMEs. Earmark 15% of government contracts for MSMEs. Actively monitor that target to ensure that it happens. Don't just set a target. Monitor the target, and if it's not on track, why is it not on track? What adjustments need to be made to make it happen? That's what we would be doing. That is building back better than before. Madam Speaker, our young people in this country have ideas. They have energy. They have talent. They need capital. They need mentorship. What are you doing about this? I don't see nothing. Way too little. We would have established a revolving $1 billion National Youth Innovation Fund to support youth-led tech and creative startups, empowering our youth to innovate and lead. That would be building back better. You must do something for the young people. I move to workers' rights and the dignity of work. Madam Speaker, the labor movement worked to build modern Jamaica. From the struggles of 1938 to the trade unions of today, workers have fought for every right they enjoy. But those rights are under threat. A stronger, fairer economy for workers is what it means to build back better than before. Madam Speaker, the abuse of contract work arrangements has become a matter of national shame. Workers in some industries are employed for years, sometimes decades, on repeating short-term contracts that deny them the benefits and protections that are afforded to permanent employees. This undermines families' long-term security, it weakens social cohesion in our society, and it must end. You seem happy to let things continue the way they are. We would not do so. We would ensure that genuine workers receive genuine rights, regardless of the legal form of their contracts. We would be passing comprehensive legislation to eliminate abusive contractual arrangements. That is building back better than before. Madam Speaker, Jamaica needs to promote productivity as the cornerstone of a strong economy. If you work extra hard, you should keep what you earn. What are you doing to incentivize greater national productivity? That's what I want to know. What are you doing? We would remove taxes on overtime pay for persons earning up to $6 million annually. We would remove tax from tips and gratuities for hotel workers and others in the hospitality sector. We would establish joint industrial councils in sectors with high employment but low union representation, bringing employers and workers together to negotiate basic standards on pay and conditions that will attract workers to those industries. Right now, they're struggling to find employees because the conditions of work and other terms are not attractive. That needs to be fixed. That is building back better than before. Madam Speaker, no Jamaican in full-time employment should be living in poverty. We would task the Planning Institute of Jamaica with developing a framework for transitioning from a minimum wage to a living wage, tied to the actual cost of living and adjusted annually for inflation. This would be building back better than before. No more arbitrary increases and so on. It would be a better system. But, Madam Speaker, while doing these important things for the workers, we must not leave out the employers. In taking on the risks of business, they create employment opportunities for our people. They tell us that one of their biggest challenges right now is finding skilled workforce, a skilled workforce that their business needs. Our economy generally, and reconstruction after Melissa in particular, requires skills that have been depleted in this country by years of migration and the mismanagement, quite frankly, of the national training system. This government has failed to come to grips with the productivity gap. Productivity has been in persistent long-term decline in Jamaica at an average annual rate of nearly 0.9%. That problem must be addressed. Sustainable economic growth cannot move to the next gear without a skilled workforce to drive productivity. Good. I'm glad to see you clap. I want to see you do something about it. That's what I want. I don't want to clap. I want you to do something about it. We do not believe in importing workers when Jamaicans here can do the work. We don't believe in that. On the other hand, where skills are needed to build the economy and those skills are not available here, it holds back investment and growth. Our system of work permits needs to efficiently, transparently, and inexpensively facilitate the filling of skills which, based on objective evidence and analysis, are insufficiently available locally. It cannot be that you just open up to foreign workers to undercut local workers, drive down or suppress wages in the economy, and also having a permit system which is often corrupt. That can't be the solution. We would implement a digital system for work permit applications to streamline the process for overseas skills, as has been done successfully in Grenada. Grenada started it, and we can do it. While this will help to drive economic growth in the short term, importing skills cannot be a substitute for building and retaining local capacity. Businesses who employ persons from overseas must put in place apprenticeship programs to ensure the transfer of skills to local workers, so that when the overseas employee's contract is up, the skills are still here to help build our economy. Our plan would also incentivize the building of local capacity by providing a matching grant, dollar for dollar, to businesses which invest in training programs. This would be funded out of heart, but would utilize the best form of training, which is hands-on training, on the job, practical experience, immersed in the work discipline of an actual business environment. One for one, dollar for dollar, building the training network, the training capacity of the country so we can improve productivity, upskill our workforce, compete in the world, build wealth and a strong economy. Madam Speaker, the quality of a society should be measured by how it treats its most vulnerable members. You say a lot, but you don't deliver anything. Our senior citizens, much of whom have spent their working lives building this country, too often struggle to access their pensions on time. Persons with disabilities face barriers in transportation, housing, education, employment, and daily life. Survivors of domestic violence seek shelter and find waiting lists. That's what's happening. What are you doing about these things? That's my question. What are you doing about these things? The slow payment of pensions, the need for accessibility for persons with disabilities, and domestic violence victims. Strengthening our social safety net should be a critical part of building back better. We would recognize and prioritize timely delivery of pension payments and increase the tax exemption on pension income, recognizing that our seniors have paid their dues and deserve to live with dignity. That should be done. We would be making real positive change. We would establish a national disability fund, allocating, again, $1 billion annually to support persons with disabilities. You see, when you target resources, it's not huge sums of money, but when they're targeted to areas of need, it can really make a massive difference. And that's what needs to happen. That fund would be providing assistive technologies, improved accessibility, and supporting organizations that serve the disability community. We would increase past benefits for pregnant mothers, ensuring adequate nutrition during pregnancy. We would establish support centers in every parish for survivors of domestic and gender-based violence, providing safe havens, counseling, and legal support. Every parish should have a center for that type of care and protection, because gender-based violence is a big problem right across the country. We recognize that important, unsupported social outreach of the church community and other faith-based organizations. We recognize how important that is. They assist vulnerable Jamaicans, especially in underserved communities. We would be establishing a faith-based community transformation fund, funded with $1 billion annually, to support the programs of churches and faith-based organizations that strengthen families, that promote economic resilience, and build community cohesion. They are filling a massive gap in underserved communities, but they struggle. They could do so much more. They have the wherewithal, they have the good intent, they know the people on the ground. The state should get behind them and help to make them make a big difference. Madam Speaker, these are measures that would build back better than before. Now, all well-thinking Jamaicans, welcome and celebrate the significant fall in murders in Jamaica over the past 2 years. And that is after 8 years of questionable policies, using states of emergency as a routine policing tool that the Constitutional Court has ruled to be unlawful. I once again want to extend congratulations to the Commissioner of Police and those brave and selfless police officers for this significant achievement. Respect is due to them. Madam Speaker, the policy of focused deterrence, which we have been calling for some time, has brought results. However, few people are comfortable with a very high level of police fatal shootings. sometimes in circumstances where there are no living witnesses other than the officers involved. Sustained success in law enforcement. Sustained success in law enforcement requires the support and buy-in of the local population. It does. You can't have a sustained program without the support of the local population. And that support will be at risk if there is a feeling that accountability and justice are being sacrificed. And I've experienced this recently in my own constituency. It's a matter that is probably going to be before the court and so on. I'm not going to speak to it in detail. This is why I once again call for the introduction of body-worn cameras, especially on special operations, when many of the controversial fatal shootings take place. It is not happening. Don't tell me it's happening. Body-worn cameras have been successfully used overseas and are now the norm in several jurisdictions. Madam Speaker, the Jamaica Constabulary Force will benefit. The force will benefit from the enhanced confidence that it will bring among the population when they are assured that there is accountability on both sides for what happened and that they are here to serve and protect. It is a win-win, and I encourage the police to roll it out quickly. Madam Speaker, thousands of Jamaicans are trapped in a cycle of debt, which prevents them from moving forward. They owe property taxes, they owe traffic tickets, they owe water bills, they owe student loans. Interest and penalties have often grown larger than the original debt, and they cannot see a way out. Providing a genuine second chance to these Jamaicans so that they can start over again is a powerful way to build back better than before. We should offer them a second chance for a clean slate. We would give people some room to restart and recover. We would forgive outstanding interest and penalties owed to the government on these debts. And we would provide a moratorium payment for the repayment of principal. This is an investment in economic activity. When people are freed from the weight of unpayable debt, they can start to build back their lives. Most often, they benefit from learning where they went wrong before and avoiding repeating those past mistakes. You won't get 100% improvement, but in any good idea, if you're getting majority benefits, and that's worth doing. Many will start businesses. Some will buy homes. They will contribute to the economy. Madam Speaker, clean slate is not just compassionate. It is economically sound. It is another building block in the foundation of building back better than before. Madam Speaker, women are the backbone of this economy and this society. Women. Women run our markets. Women create new businesses as entrepreneurs, including in agriculture. They staff our hospitals. They lead our classrooms. They shape businesses and corporations. They basically are the majority in the judiciary, in the civil service. They hold families together. Our women are real superstars. Yet the data shows starkly that systems and structures of our society are failing women in several respects. One in four women will experience interpartner violence in their lifetime. 1 in 4. Women earn less than men for equivalent work. They are overrepresented in informal employment without access to pensions, health insurance, or housing loans. They bear the primary burden of unpaid care work in the home, and that limits their ability to participate fully in the economy. And when disaster strikes, as it did with Hurricane Melissa, women and girls are disproportionately affected, facing increased risks of violence, displacement, and economic insecurity. I want to say, what are you doing about this? concrete, measurable action is needed. We would tackle gender-based violence as the national emergency it is. We would launch a national mobile app for the immediate reporting of gender-based violence, integrated with emergency services and local shelters. We would establish special victim support centres, as I've said, in every parish, providing safe havens, counselling and legal support for survivors. We would complete the long-standing review, the outstanding review of the Domestic Violence Act and implement its recommendations to protect women against domestic violence, against stalking, against cyber harassment, against digital abuse. We would strengthen the economic empowerment of women. Our 3-year tax holiday would help women-owned enterprises to step out of the shadows and into the formal economy, earmarking 15% of government contracts for MSMEs would create new opportunities for women entrepreneurs. Our Clean Slate program, forgiving interest and penalties on debts owed to government, will disproportionately benefit women as they are overrepresented among micro-entrepreneurs and informal workers. And our policy to remove tax from overtime pay for persons earning up to $6 million a year would put more money in the pockets of working women. Our policies on ending the abuse of short-term contracts at the workplace and the establishment of joint industrial councils in sectors where union representation is low, such as tourism and retail and security, would benefit women who are predominant in those sectors. We would seek to enhance women's participation in political life. For the first time, over 30% of our candidates in the last general election were women. We will work with all political parties, civil society, the Electoral Commission to explore mechanisms for increasing women's representation in national and local government. Madam Speaker, these measures are part of a comprehensive approach to gender justice that recognizes that when women rise, Jamaica rises. When women are safe, families are safe. When women earn, communities prosper. When women lead, governments and governance improves. Because building back better than before means building back fairer, building back with justice, building back so that every Jamaican, regardless of gender, can live in dignity, security and hope, there must be an activist policy in this area. That is our commitment, and we are assured that it would mean building back better than before. Madam Speaker, in 6 months, Jamaica has endured a ferocious hurricane that has tested our national will and our resilience. The war in the Middle East will reverberate across the globe to our shores, threatening supply chains, pushing up prices, making daily lives even harder. The coming months and the coming years will require many decisions that will test our judgment. This is not the time for lazy thinking, for complacency in how the country is governed. As we have shown in this budget debate, there is a better way that things can be done, from the design of the budget itself to the prioritization of things that can make Jamaica stronger and make life better for our people. As this budget debate has shown, there is a genuine alternative to the status quo, an alternative that actively builds on the solid foundation of fiscal stability and brings hope to our people. Jamaica's economy does not need to just drift slowly along as the dreams of our people take them overseas. Now is the time to build back better. It is not just a slogan. It is a call to action for Jamaica to step up its game, do the things and make the changes that will bring a positive difference to our reality. We have put in the time and effort to show that there's a better way forward for Jamaica. We are ready to confront and overcome the challenges and deliver strong and inclusive national development. Yes, it is possible to build a Jamaica where every child can learn, where workers earn value for their effort, where businesses can grow, where each family can own a home, and where every citizen can live with dignity. May God bless the people of Jamaica and this beautiful land we call home. Thank you.
House Leader.
Madam Speaker, we thank the Leader of the Opposition for his presentation. We will return to the House on Thursday, when we will be addressed in the budget debate by the Prime Minister of Jamaica. Madam Speaker, so we now move to suspend the budget debate and return on Thursday, and it is intended to do no further business today. So I ask that the House be adjourned until Thursday, March 19 at 2 p.m.
As indicated by the House Leader, the request is that we suspend the debate until Thursday, March 19. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. We now move for the adjournment of the House, which will meet Thursday, March 19, 2026 at 2 p.m. sharp. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This honorable House now stands adjourned.